Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. The most dangerous woman is not the one shouting, not the one posting, not the one always trying to be seen. No, no, no. The most dangerous woman is silent. And not because she's afraid, not because she's weak, but because she trusts God. See, when you really trust God, when you really know who holds your tomorrow, you don't have to fight like everybody else. You don't have to chase every insult. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, because you know, deep in your soul, that God already wrote your victory. You think silence is surrender. Nah, silence is power. That kind of silence, that's the sound of a woman who's listening, listening to the Spirit, listening for direction, listening not for noise, but for clarity. The world don't understand that kind of peace. The kind that says, I see the storm, but I know who controls the wind. She's dangerous because she's anchored. She's not moved by opinions, not shaken by betrayal, not scared of the dark, because she knows she's never alone. You can't threaten a woman who walks with God. You can't intimidate someone who's already overcome. While others are panicking, she's praying. While others are reacting, she's waiting, because she knows when the time comes, God will move. And when God moves, everything moves. So if you see a woman who's silent in the middle of the mess, don't mistake that for defeat. That's not a breakdown, that's a build-up. That's a woman watching the walls of Jericho fall without lifting a finger. Let the world talk, let the enemy plot, she's still. Because her faith is loud enough. That woman is dangerous, not because of what she says, but because of who she trusts. And when you trust God, you win, even when you're quiet. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom and strength under control. In a world that praises noise, quick comebacks, and loud displays of emotion, silence is often misunderstood. People think if you're quiet, you don't have anything to say. If you don't react, you're scared. If you don't fight back, you've lost. But the truth is, silence can be the loudest declaration of power. It takes more strength to remain calm in chaos than to join the noise. It takes more courage to hold your peace when your flesh wants to retaliate. A person who is truly strong doesn't need to shout to prove a point. They understand that restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. Silence is the mark of someone who chooses their battles carefully. It means knowing that not every insult deserves a response. Not every situation requires your energy. It's the decision to stay centered when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance. That kind of silence is built on wisdom. It knows the cost of wasted words and drained emotion. It knows that sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. When a woman or anyone chooses silence from a place of trust, from a place of spiritual discernment, it's not passivity. It's positioning. It means they are letting something greater lead. That silence is charged with patience, with faith, with perspective. It is not empty. It is full of understanding, and when the time comes to speak, that voice will carry weight, not just sound, because it's been refined in stillness. Silence like that is not weakness. It's dangerous. It confuses the enemy, it frustrates the proud, and it protects peace like a sword guards a kingdom. That kind of silence, rooted in strength, led by wisdom, is one of the most powerful forces a person can carry. A woman who trusts God doesn't need to react. She responds with faith. Reaction is immediate. It's emotional, impulsive, often driven by fear, pride, or pain. But response is intentional. It comes from a place of clarity and purpose. When a woman is anchored in her faith, she doesn't move just because the world shakes. She's not tossed around by people's opinions, false accusations, or temporary setbacks. She knows her foundation is higher, her strength is deeper, and her direction comes from above. Trusting God means she's not living for approval or applause. She understands that every situation is not an attack, it might be a test. And rather than react with anger or anxiety, she responds with prayer, patience, and discernment. That doesn't mean she's passive, it means she's powerful in a way the world can't always see. Her faith teaches her to pause before speaking, to listen before judging, to seek wisdom before moving. Because she knows that God is already working behind the scenes, her role is not to control, but to obey. When you trust God, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to match someone's energy or argue to be heard. Faith allows you to step back and let God be God. It gives you the strength to be still in the storm, not because you don't feel it, but because you know who calms it. So when conflict arises, when betrayal stings, when the pressure mounts, she doesn't panic. She leans into her faith. She asks, God, what do you want me to do here? And from that place she responds, not with emotion, but with wisdom, not with fear, but with confidence. That response may not be loud, but it is powerful, because it is rooted in divine trust, not human reaction. She understands that vengeance isn't hers, it belongs to God. That truth frees her from the weight of retaliation. When someone wrongs her, she doesn't spend her nights plotting revenge or rehearsing what she'll say to make them feel what she felt. She doesn't carry bitterness like armor. She lays it down and walks away with her dignity intact, not because she's naive, not because she forgets, but because she knows justice is not her burden to carry. It's God's, and He never misses. There is a quiet power in refusing to get even. It takes strength to release what you could hold on to. It takes faith to walk away from a fight you know you could win in the flesh, because you trust God to handle it in the spirit. A woman who understands this lives differently. She's not consumed by resentment. She doesn't waste her energy proving a point. She doesn't clap back to feel powerful, because she already knows who fights for her. Letting go of vengeance doesn't mean she's weak. It means she's wise. She knows that trying to take justice into her own hands only delays the peace God has for her. She's not interested in exchanging pain for more pain. She wants healing, and she knows that healing doesn't come from hurting others. It comes from trusting God with the hurt. This kind of woman believes in divine timing. She believes that God sees what was done, hears what was said, and knows what's hidden. So she doesn't need to scream or prove. She simply hands it over and says, God, you deal with it. I'm moving on. That decision makes her dangerous, not because she's passive, but because she's powerful enough to rise above and trust that the ultimate judge will make all things right. Her silence is not surrender. It's a strategy guided by divine discernment. When she chooses to be quiet, it's not because she's defeated or unsure. It's because she's listening to God, not the noise. She knows there's a difference between silence and passivity. Her quietness is intentional. It's a tool sharpened by experience, patience, and wisdom. In a world that moves too fast and talks too loud, her stillness becomes her strength. She's not ignoring what's happening around her. She's observing, praying, discerning. She doesn't move unless God tells her to. There's a holy kind of discipline in knowing when not to speak. When others are quick to argue, defend, or justify, she holds her peace. Not because she lacks words, but because she knows that words spoken out of season can do more harm than good. She understands that timing is spiritual, that every response isn't necessary, and every battle isn't hers to fight. Her silence is not a gap, it's a guard. It protects her from unnecessary drama, and it protects her calling from being contaminated by distraction. Discernment teaches her that some things are better handled in prayer than in conversation. Some doors are better left closed. Some attacks are better left unanswered, because she trusts that God reveals what needs to be seen in His time. She doesn't waste her voice trying to convince people who aren't ready to understand. She doesn't chase clarity from chaos. Instead, she waits. She listens for the whisper of direction from the one who sees the whole picture. This silence is rooted in discernment, a spiritual sensitivity that tells her when to act, when to speak, and when to be still. It's not retreat, it's positioning. She may be quiet, but don't mistake that for inaction. She's aligning herself with something greater than noise. She's moving with purpose under divine instruction. She's not loud because her peace speaks louder than chaos. In a world that rewards noise, where people equate volume with value, she chooses a different way. She doesn't need to shout to be seen or scream to be heard. Her presence speaks for itself because it carries a stillness the world can't counterfeit. That stillness is peace, not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind forged through fire and held together by faith. It's not temporary or shallow. It's the peace that stays steady when the world is falling apart, when rumors swirl, when pressure rises. That kind of peace doesn't need a microphone. It makes its own statement. She understands that chaos feeds off reaction. The more you engage it, the more it grows. But peace, real peace, shrinks the power of confusion. It calms the room without a single word. It diffuses drama by refusing to participate. And she carries that kind of peace like armor, not because she's indifferent, but because she's intentional. She has fought too many inner battles to let the noise on the outside steal her stillness on the inside. When others panic, she pauses. When others lash out, she leans in. She's not numb, she's centered. Her peace doesn't come from having it all figured out. It comes from trusting the one who does. That's why she doesn't have to raise her voice to make an impact. Her spirit speaks louder than sound ever could, and it unsettles those who thrive on instability. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't rush, doesn't crack. But that's because they don't know what it's like to walk in peace that was prayed for, fought for, and guarded with intention. She's not loud because she doesn't need to be. Her calm is her confidence, and it commands attention without demanding it. Trusting God gives her clarity, purpose, and unshakable inner power. She no longer stumbles in confusion or guesses every step because she knows who leads her. When the world throws distractions, doubts, and detours, her faith clears the fog. It doesn't mean she has every answer, but it means she knows where to look. She doesn't need to chase validation or follow the crowd. She follows God, and in doing so, she finds direction that isn't swayed by trends or temporary emotions. Clarity comes when she releases control and surrenders her own plans for something higher. She sees through situations with spiritual eyes, recognizing that not every opportunity is a blessing, and not every delay is a denial. That clarity gives her purpose. She's not just surviving, she's walking intentionally. Every step she takes is backed by conviction. Every decision, every boundary, every move is guided by something deeper than ambition. It's guided by assignment, and from that clarity and purpose comes a strength the world cannot shake. She has an inner power that doesn't scream, but doesn't budge either. She doesn't crumble under pressure because her foundation isn't built on circumstance. It's built on truth. She draws strength from prayer, from the word, from knowing she's held in hands greater than her own. Storms may come, but she remains rooted. Criticism may rise, but she stands firm. Her power doesn't come from status, titles, or applause. It flows from within, from the quiet assurance that she is exactly where God wants her to be. This unshakable inner power isn't loud or flashy. It's steady, it's calm, it's courageous. It carries her through every trial and gives her the boldness to face the unknown, not with fear, but with faith. Because trusting God doesn't just change how she moves, it transforms who she is. She's dangerous to the enemy because she's spiritually aligned and fearless. The enemy doesn't fear her strength or her intelligence. He fears her connection to God. When a woman is spiritually aligned, she taps into a power that transcends the physical realm. She doesn't rely on her own understanding or capabilities. but on the wisdom and strength that God provides. This alignment gives her clarity and discernment, allowing her to see the enemy's tactics before they even unfold. Her prayers are not just words, they are weapons. When she speaks in faith, the heavens respond. When she stands firm, the enemy's plans begin to crumble. Fearlessness isn't about the absence of fear, it's about the courage to move forward despite it. She knows that fear has no place in her life because her trust in God has replaced it. She walks with a confidence that cannot be shaken, because she understands that greater is He who is in her than he who is in the world. Her courage is rooted in the truth that no weapon formed against her will prosper, that every obstacle is an opportunity for God to demonstrate His power. She doesn't back down from challenges, she faces them head on, knowing that God is with her and for her. The enemy may try to intimidate, distract, or discourage her, but because she's spiritually aligned, she's untouchable. Her faith makes her dangerous because it turns every setback into a setup for victory. When the enemy sees her, he sees not just a woman, but a force that cannot be moved, a vessel of divine purpose that will not be defeated. Her fearlessness, fueled by her connection to God, makes her a threat to everything that stands against His will for her life. Her strength is rooted in stillness, not noise. In a world that constantly urges action, noise, and movement, she knows that true power doesn't come from how loudly she can speak or how fast she can run. It comes from the quiet moments where she aligns herself with God's presence. When everything around her is loud, chaotic, and demanding her attention, she remains still. She doesn't get caught up in the frenzy because she understands that in stillness she finds clarity. Her strength isn't measured by her ability to keep up with the world's pace. It's found in her ability to stand firm, calm, and unwavering, even in the midst of uncertainty. Stillness is where she finds her center, where she hears God's voice more clearly than any outside influence. It's in these moments of quiet reflection that she draws her deepest strength. The world may celebrate busyness, but she knows that God speaks in the stillness, and that's where her purpose is revealed. She doesn't need to prove her strength through constant motion. It's the peace that anchors her, that gives her the power to endure. Her stillness doesn't mean she's passive or complacent. It means she's active in the right way. While others might be running in circles, she's steady and focused. She moves only when God tells her to. This stillness gives her the endurance to face challenges with a calm assurance, knowing that her strength is not of her own making. It's a divine strength that rises up in her when she's aligned with the will of God, and because her foundation is solid, no matter how much noise or distraction surrounds her, she remains unshaken. She walks by faith, not by sight, and that confuses those who can't see her source. In a world that relies heavily on what can be seen and proven, she chooses to trust in what is unseen, and that makes her different. When others are scrambling to control every detail, to measure their success by tangible results, she moves forward on a different foundation. Her steps are guided by a quiet, unshakable confidence in something far greater than herself. She knows that what she sees with her eyes is temporary, but what she holds in her heart is eternal. Her faith gives her the courage to move even when the path isn't clear, to trust even when the road is uncertain. To the world, this can seem illogical, even reckless. People ask, how can you keep going when you don't know what's ahead? But for her, it's not about knowing the outcome, it's about trusting the one who holds the outcome. Her faith is not based on what she can touch or see, but on the promises of God, which are unshakable and unfailing. It's her faith that anchors her, even when circumstances would suggest otherwise, and that leaves those around her in awe and confusion, because they can't understand how she moves with such certainty when everything around her is unpredictable. She doesn't need external validation or visible proof, because she trusts that God's plan is already in motion, even when she can't see it yet. That's the power of walking by faith. It doesn't always make sense to those who can only rely on their physical senses, but to her, it's a source of inner strength that keeps her moving forward, unwavering, even when the world doesn't understand why. God fights her battles, so she doesn't need to raise her voice, only her prayers. In a world that often demands confrontation, retaliation, and loud displays of power, she knows that true strength doesn't come from fighting on her own terms. When life presents challenges, when people betray her, or when circumstances feel overwhelming, she doesn't meet aggression with aggression. She doesn't try to manipulate or control every situation. Instead, she lifts her heart and her voice in prayer, surrendering it all to God. Her trust is in His ability to fight for her, to protect her, and to lead her through the storm. She understands that her words in prayer are far more powerful than any argument or defense she could present on her own. When she faces injustice, when she's wronged, her instinct is not to argue or defend herself, it's to pray. Prayer becomes her weapon. She's learned that when she aligns her heart with God's will, He steps into the situation and moves in ways she couldn't even imagine. Prayer is where her power is found, not in the volume of her voice or in how fiercely she can confront her enemies. In those quiet moments, as she releases the situation to God, she taps into a power far greater than anything she could muster on her own. By trusting God to fight her battles, she frees herself from the burden of vengeance and self-justification. She doesn't need to make anyone see her side or win anyone over. She knows God sees all, hears all, and will bring justice in His perfect timing. And so, instead of raising her voice in anger, she raises her voice in faith, knowing that God is already at work. In the end, the woman who trusts God becomes a force unlike any other. She doesn't need to fight with the world's weapons, loudness, anger, or self-reliance, because her strength is rooted in her faith. Her silence is strategic, her peace is powerful, and her prayers are potent. She walks by faith, not by sight, and that makes her unstoppable. When others see a moment of vulnerability, she sees an opportunity for God to show His power. The enemy may try to shake her, to distract her, but her spirit remains unshaken because she knows who fights for her. She doesn't need to prove herself, and she doesn't need to raise her voice. She simply trusts in the one who holds all things in His hands, and that trust makes her dangerous to the forces that oppose her. Her strength lies in her stillness, her clarity comes from her alignment with God, and her purpose is unshakable because it's built on a foundation that cannot be moved. The world may not always understand her peace, her quiet courage, or her unwavering faith, but it doesn't matter. She knows that as long as she is aligned with God's will, nothing can stand against her. She is not passive, she is powerful, and her power comes from the divine connection she has with the one who created her. That is the woman who trusts God, unmoved by the chaos, unstoppable in her purpose, and dangerous to the enemy who cannot touch her faith.